Happy Tuesday.
Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, May 31st, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello, and I've got a calendar in front of me.
I'm Jan Levine, and I'm a very happy Rangers fan right now.
And I'm Eklund.
Oh, we got Russ.
And there's Russ Cohen is joining us too. And I'm Eklund, and I am happy to have these four in the Final Four. And we're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings, goings in the hockey world. Sorry, I had a little bit of a major dog emergency today, so I am on the road, but I will be hopefully home before this podcast ends. So anyway, we're gonna start here though. But we only have Jan for like 15 minutes here, so we're gonna start with Jan right off the bat. And Jan, that was a hell of a the Rangers now down 2-0 in the series, down 3-2 in the series, down 3-1 in the first series. This team just keeps going.
Well, I guess the hashtag of no quit in New York really has proven to be prescient. It's kind of been their mantra all season long. We talked about it after the first round. 27 times during the season, they came back trailing in games and ended up getting wins. And they've shown in the past history that having deficits in terms of series wasn't a precluding factor from them winning. Happened in 2014, happened in 2015. Ironically, they get to face the team that has knocked out the New York teams the last 3 times in the playoffs between the Rangers and the Islanders. I mean, look, if you look at the series, Carolina, Rangers were the better team the first 40 minutes of game 1 and then inexplicably kind of stopped playing a little bit, and Carolina took advantage. In game 2, tight checking game, Carolina took advantage. When they came back home, New York was clearly the better team in games 3 and 4 at home. Game 5 was an absolute embarrassment. I mean, they got whitewashed, and that's when a lot of people kind of started throwing in the towel, and they came home in game 6. But, going into game 7, my view, unfortunately, was this was reminiscent of the Tampa series in 2015, where the Rangers kind of dominated certain games and then went into game 7 and completely laid an egg. Yesterday, the power play initially, first of all, great play by Vetrano in center ice to keep the puck alive. Kopp made the great play. Lafreniere with the drop pass and Kopp with the screen in front. I mean, the second goal was clearly set up on Trouba, based upon Trouba's hit with getting the extra man. And look, I'm going to kind of cover that because it's been the cause celeb, and I'm going to cover 2 aspects. So first of all, the hit, I'm not sure how you can rule it wasn't a clean hit. Now, if you want to argue any sort of hand contact in general should result in a penalty, I'm not going to argue. But the contact was shoulder to shoulder. He may have lifted the arm slightly, but it wasn't directed to the head. The initial contact with his shoulder, completely legal hit. Is it a vicious hit? Is it a hit that you don't want to see anybody get hurt on? Absolutely. But to call out on social media that every time Trouba throws a hit, that it's completely illegal and therefore he deserves a penalty or suspension is getting beyond the pale. And Russ has talked about it. Like every time he throws a hit, you're expecting somebody to turn around and start fighting him, which is what happened pretty much every single hit lately.
And Jan, if that was a double whammy, I'll go to Russ here. That was a double whammy because not only does Trouba knock Seth Jarvis silly, Jarvis is struggling to get back to the bench. Somebody jumps on the ice. They get a too many men on the ice penalty, and Kreider scores the goal to make it 2-0, which it wasn't a dagger, Russ, but it was pretty close to being a dagger early on.
It hurt him. It wasn't a dagger, but it hurt him. The thing about Trouba is this, and all these hits, these are targeted, clean hits. This is what happens in the playoffs. Niederreiter did it to Lindgren. Every team's got a guy or two that do them. Sometimes they hurt your guy and he goes out for the series. Sometimes they don't. And so, to get outraged at these, it's not worth it. It's like you've seen this before. You've grown up with this. Just because we're not allowing head hits, it doesn't mean all hits are going to be abolished.
And we have Kev. He just joined. And Kevin, I wanted to ask you this. Up 2-0 in the first, I got the feeling that Carolina was pressing so badly at the end of the first period to get a goal. And that's when Shesterkin was his best. He made this unbelievable save late in the first period. And I had the feeling that if they had scored a goal, there would have been a game. But staying up 2-0 and then them lengthening the lead in the second, I thought Carolina lost all, the air escaped from the balloon.
I think they really fell victim to the pressure. Like I felt they approached that game trying not to lose it as opposed to trying to win. Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like, the way this thing had played out for them, and they had, not won on the road, but could win at home. I thought, now the pressure is on them, and we talk all the time about, Game 7s are historically a coin flip. They're 50-50. There is no home ice advantage. They know all that. And I think they also knew how well Shesterkin was playing, and I think he was in their heads. And, so I think going in, a lot of people thought the Rangers were going to win that Game 7, and I think a few of them were on the Carolina Hurricanes team. And, I agree with everything Mike just said about how they played the game, and they almost played defeated from the very beginning. They did not play like the Carolina team that I've seen, this season. And the other element to it is the Rangers are a very good team. Everybody's known they were a good team all along. Their only difficulty, in my estimation, is their defense is porous. I looked at the advanced stats just recently, and they gave up more dangerous scoring chances by far than anybody in the playoffs. But they've got Shesterkin. And when you have a guy like that, you can play like that. I mean, you really can. So,
go ahead.
Yeah. Once in a while, I mean, it's like they're an interesting team because they look great at times. They look terrible at times. Shesterkin does step up when he has to. But the great and terrible thing is just very typical of a young team, and it's just that's what they are. And Gallant coaches them like that too, which is interesting. They play all out all the time, which is. I mean, but honestly, yesterday there was a real confidence that the Rangers had that the Carolina Hurricanes didn't have in that game, and you could see it from the puck drop. It was just there, and I don't know if the Rangers were just.
Did we lose Zach?
We lost Zach.
Okay, Jan. What I was going to ask is, I mean, I think you saw in this series, especially in the games at home, but also Game 7, that the star players for the Rangers came to the forefront. Fox, Zibanejad. I mean, Kreider early in the series didn't do a lot, but Kreider in Game 7, less so Panarin. Panarin, I think, was sort of vacant for a while. But when they needed it, those star players were there.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Shesterkin had a 1.76 goals again and a 953 save percentage in the series, right? And Gallant in the postgame said, look, we know we're not a perfect team, but we have the goalie. I mean, we all know that that's the case. And the high danger shots, as long as he gets to see them, the majority of the time he's going to get to save them. Fox had a goal and assist. He has 10 points in the 5 elimination games that the Rangers have played this year. Right. Kreider scored twice. He now has, I think he's tied for second with 15 goals historically, one behind Messier for most goals in an elimination game. Zibanejad had 3 assists yesterday. He now has 19 points overall in the playoffs. 19 points in the playoffs, 7 behind McDavid and Draisaitl for first overall. I mean, you look at Panarin actually thought I played pretty well yesterday. So as you mentioned, the stars were the stars yesterday, right? But more important, you got contributions yesterday from supporting guys. Strome had a goal after Kochetkov made a brilliant save on a shot that probably should have been a goal. He came back on the same shift and scored. Andrew Kopp had the empty netter and an assist yesterday, right? So you looked up and down the lineup. 12 guys had points yesterday. It was total team effort. I mean, look, they are a flawed team. And it kind of gets to my second point, right? Look, there's no question they got breaks the first 2 rounds, right? Tristan Jarry missing the first 6 games, as I wrote. Casey DeSmith getting hurt. Sidney Crosby getting injured in Game 5 and missing part of Game 5 and Game 6, right? You also know that, in this series, you had Antti Ranta in instead of Frederick Anderson. All of that is true, but you need to take advantage of your breaks. You need to make the most out of them. And there's no question they're going to take up a step in class right now against a Tampa Bay team, for all we know, who might be missing Braden Point this series. Yeah. But it's a major step up. But the advantage is, look, New York did not have Tyler Mott for the good part of the first round. They didn't have Ryan Lindgren for 3 games. They didn't have Barclay Goodrow for 11 games. So it evens out on both sides. But look, am I going to say they're not a flawed team? Of course not. They took advantage of the opportunities presented to them, and now they take up a major step in class, which you would figure would be the case when you make the conference finals in either division.
Yeah, and Russ, the return of Goodrow in Game 6 really turned out to be big because he killed penalties, and you can see, even though he's hampered, apparently it's a fractured ankle, he's playing on a 4th line. He's playing, he's making that line at least a threat, because Ryan Reeves isn't much of a threat, but you put Goodrow on that line and it's actually effective.
Yeah, and he's blocking shots. He wasn't doing great on faceoffs, but that's fine. But he also just brings a winning element to the bench. It makes a difference. He probably kept guys calm. It's a pretty big deal. Jan thinks I was a jinx, but I said Adam Fox is in the Conn Smythe talk. He is, because, again, he's playing 25 minutes a game. He's 3rd in scoring with the which elimination games. He's got a lot of numbers that you wouldn't expect Adam Fox to pile up, and they've all piled up. Hold on, Mike. Shesterkin is Shesterkin, and that's great. We all know that. But if you take Fox off that team, Shesterkin's not going to survive.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know how if you do the Stanley Cup final, you don't choose Shesterkin as the Conn Smythe over Fox, but we can debate that if they get past Tampa.
Well, we're not ready for that yet.
No, exactly.
We're a long way from that.
Well,
I'm fighting, and all those people who say they were cruising up 3-0. Mike, as you know, 3-0 leads mean nothing in the playoffs.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff, for reminding me.
Yeah,
I'm pointing out it's not a guarantee up 3-0.
No. I know, but Kev, I found this curious on social media last night that there were people after the Rangers won saying, well, just diminishing the fact, well, they beat Pittsburgh without Jarry, they beat Carolina without Freddie Anderson, and then without Ronta in Game 7. A team can only beat a team that's in front of them. They can't choose who's going to play and who's not going to play. And I'm like, give them credit. They're in the conference final. I think Toronto fans, did you hear that from Montreal fans when they beat Toronto without John Tavares? It didn't. Beat the team in front of you.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the argument about you didn't they had is made by 11-year-olds on the schoolyard or the sports writers who don't want to think of a different angle. Because I mean, it is true. You gotta. That's just the way sports are. Is that always there are issues that every team has to deal with. Like all the it's interesting. Everybody's talking about the Rangers being flawed. Well, all these teams are flawed.
Sure.
The 4 that are left. I had a conversation last week before about how someone was talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he said, what's really impressive about the Lightning is they're not anywhere near the team they were over the last 2 years. Like he said, we played them a lot, and he goes, and I can tell you, they're not the same team. He said, they have really put their nose to the grindstone and figured out a way to win. But he said, play for the teams who played them last year and the year before basis now, they're just not even close to being as dangerous. They just simply can't do it. So, give them credit for rising up and playing them. But, this is a different matchup than the Rangers would have had they played last year's Tampa Bay team. Does that make it any, if the Rangers win, would it make it any less reason to celebrate? Well, of course not. Like, it's ridiculous to, kind of talk about that. So, I'm looking forward to.
We said probably a month ago, none of us would be shocked if the Rangers were in the conference final.
No.
We all said it.
Yeah, no, because to be honest with you, we've been talking about this from the beginning of the season. The Rangers are a very talented team. They're very entertaining. They've got Shesterkin, and as soon as he started playing well at the start of the season, I think all of us said, "Wow, they could be." Everybody. Some people listed them as a sleeper, but they weren't really a sleeper as much as they were just a unpolished, unproven team. But they were very talented, all the way through. But I think what's interesting from the national perspective about this series coming up is, this. We always talk about what would be best for the league, but having Shesterkin versus Vasilevsky, I mean, that is a wonderful sell to people. I mean, I'm just, I talked about it coming in. I really wanted to see this matchup, and now we're going to get to see it, and we get to talk about it. And, you have the best goalie this season is Shesterkin against the best goalie in the league. And, he played over the last, he was, and I hate to say this because I'm only judging him against himself, but he was relatively ordinary this season, Vasilevsky. He has not been ordinary in the last 5 games. So,
Jan,
it's going to be interesting.
Before you have to go, Jan, I just wanted to say that, I picked Rangers in my playoff hockey pool. So I was all in on the Rangers. And they're really fulfilling what I expected them to do. But the thing that shocks me the most, in spite of, I thought Shesterkin was probably arguably the best or second best goaltender in the playoffs going in. They're doing this without Panarin. Without Panarin really producing at a high level.
No, absolutely. I mean, he's been very uneven this playoffs. He really had the one big moment against against Pittsburgh in Game 7. But other than that, right, and the question has been, is he playing with an injury or something else going on?
He probably has a wrist injury, Jan. That's what it looks like.
It's a wrist or a shoulder is what it kind of looked like in terms of his, his inability to shoot. But, he's a threat. He's a threat, right? So you have to kind of mark him as a threat. And when he's able to create, and again, my viewpoint against Tampa is going to kind of squeeze the neutral zone a little bit, but I don't think they're kind of as committed to it sometimes as Carolina is. I do think you're going to see Panarin have a bit more maneuverability and room to move through the neutral zone, and also create a bit more in the offensive zone to try to set up some of his teammates, which has kind of not been the case the first 2 rounds of the series, given the way that both Pittsburgh and Carolina played against them.
All right, Jan, thanks. Maybe we can get you for 15 minutes tomorrow when we preview the series. So thanks a lot, Jan.
Absolutely. It's put it this way, the New York City has got a little bit of a buzz and a little bit of vibe right now with the Rangers going on right now. So it's nice to kind of see again. The last time obviously being 2015, so it's nice to see again.
Yep. All right, Jan. Talk to you later.
Take care, guys. Bye.
15. I covered that 15 Game 7. I told you. And the minute in warm-ups when Ryan McDonough went out on the ice and tested his foot/ankle, and he was just like, I can't do it. And he went back in. I texted somebody and said, this series is over. I knew it was over. But luckily, I don't think either team has a player other than Point that injured where it's going to tip the series. Even McDonough, who definitely was playing hurt, is probably feeling a lot better now too.
Well, Hagel didn't practice, and there was another player that didn't practice, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to play in the games. Before we move on, I think we have.
But I mean, can you hear me again or no?
Yeah. No, go ahead, Ak.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think I heard Kevin as I was breaking up there say what I kind of wanted to say, which was that what I love about this Final Four is that this is like the most star power we've ever had in the Final Four that I can remember. Just basically having the two of the best forwards in the game, and obviously McKinnon and McDavid, 2 of the best defensemen in Fox and Makar, the 2 best goalies in Shesterkin and Vasilevsky. I mean, this is like.
Well, can I dispute that for a second? Because I saw somebody say that, and it's like, everybody is guilty of recency bias. You can say, well, McKinnon and Landeskog or whatever on the Avalanche side, and McDavid and Draisaitl on the Edmonton side. Does anybody remember Detroit, Colorado with Yzerman and Shanahan and Fedorov and Sack? I mean,
for sure. But this is we're talking about all 4 teams here, Mike. We're talking about all 4 teams with there have been more powerful series, maybe with more star power. I mean, but just to go across the 4 series. I mean, it's that's what you want. I mean, from a perspective of our job, you want this kind of star power. It just makes things easier and makes the games more exciting.
I love the matchups. I think they're exciting. I can't wait to watch them. And can we just one thing on Carolina before we move on? I wanted to ask Kev because. The comment of Rod Brindamore after the game, or I think it was after the game, saying that basically the team didn't have enough scoring. I mean, I'm paraphrasing there. He said something about we didn't have something about there was not enough offense, there was not enough scoring power. It basically making an insinuation that they didn't have a sniper that could score at the right time. I mean, this is a roster. I mean, we look. Svechnikov is an extremely talented young player. Aho is a really good center. I mean, they don't have a line A or a guy who can really.
But didn't you think by now Svechnikov would have been a 30, 40 goal scorer? Yeah. So I think that's a little bit on Svechnikov. I mean, that's also. Criticism, in my opinion, of management. If you say we don't have a scorer, I mean, it's the manager's job to create more scoring. I really thought that, as I said, it looked to me like a confidence problem. They couldn't seem to, in that Game 7, like they played scared, afraid to lose. And then, but their problem during the playoffs was the inability to score on the road. And it's one thing to score at home and another to score on the road. So I think probably that's what Brendan Moore was speaking of.
Yeah, I have been saying, and I do believe that what they were relying – the reason I said that the Rangers were going to, before the season started, hammer Seth Jarvis is because I knew they were relying on him too much to sort of be that scorer because he's not there yet. He's going to be, but he's 20 years old. He's not there yet. They need to go out and get like a 30, 35-year-old guy that can do that kind of scoring, Kev, on the road, in the playoffs. That's what they need. Because if they don't get that, they're not getting over the hump, even with this really good team.
No, and I bet they thought Kotkaniemi would contribute more than he did
Yeah,
this
he's
season.
not fit in. He's not fit in yet.
Yeah, no, and I don't know. Will he ever be that guy? I mean,
Right.
who knows?
Fair
So
to ask.
They had him playing mostly third line, and
yeah,
but I mean, it really, and I can't blame the goaltending because until he got hurt, Antti Ranta was not the reason that they were losing
Yeah.
games. It was
I didn't see anybody blaming goaltending.
Yeah,
nobody's.
Their power play went 6 for 51.
No, and that's crazy. And and their penalty killing let them down. Like in Carolina. I mean, their penalty killing was the best in the league during the regular season. So that really that was not there. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, the other thing you have to remember about the Rangers here is that they have faced these second and third string goalies. Like, I mean, you can say that he played well. Ranta played well,
Yeah.
for sure. But he's not. Anderson was better during the regular season, right? I don't know that Anderson would have been better in the series, but for what it's worth, Anderson had a good season. Then, obviously in Pittsburgh, they face a third string goalie most of the time. And now they're going up against Vasilevsky. That is a huge step. I mean, not just a small.
I'm going to refer to the Sean McDonough curse because in one game earlier in the playoffs, he said this goaltender is, 2 minutes and something away from a shutout. And
That's
then
the reality.
Right, and then the team scored, and then last night he says Ranta is playing in his 11th straight game, the most in his career, and right as he's saying that, he gets hurt. It was irony.
Well, one thing I would throw in here, I disagree with what X said with regard to, that they've had to face they did face inferior compared to what they could have been, but as Mike said. And I agree with him. The way sports is, you just got to beat the teams that's opposite of you. You don't have any say in that. So, it doesn't diminish what they've accomplished because
I don't mean to diminish what they accomplished. I'm not trying to.
No, but I do agree with that completely and disagree with Mike about. I think this collection of talent in the four, like we really haven't had that in a long time. You go back in the '80s and we've had some semifinals to be sure, but to have four teams where each team has a guy that everybody's talking about. Shesterkin, we talked about a lot this season.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
Yeah, and the Lightning are the Lightning. They've got premium players, Stamkos, Kucherov, Vasilevsky, and now we've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in the playoffs, and we've got.
I got to take a little shot. I got to take a shot at Sportsnet because they went and they made a mural for the Final Four, and they put Stamkos instead of Vasilevsky. And it's why? You had it right there.
Because he's Canadian.
Canadian, right?
Yeah,
that's why they did it.
Yeah.
But
that's the case for sure. You're absolutely right, Kev. I mean, that to me is the fun part of it because remember, there's only 4 fan bases with real interest in this. There's 28 other fan bases that have to be
haters there are that will watch this. Are you kidding me?
Thank you for reminding me, Ak, because I wanted to make a little bit of comment. I have some experience at watching fans in buildings in game 7s, and the fact that with I think 15 or 16 minutes left to go in the third period, and it was 3-0. They panned the stands and they were half empty. People were leaving early in the third period in Raleigh. And I mean, honestly, from a traditional hockey market, if you were in Buffalo in a game 7 and your team was down 3-0, nobody is leaving.
I don't know. A little unfair, Mike. I think a little unfair.
I think that's unfair coming from a guy who in the first period called the game over when it was a 2-0.
I mean, I think that people had the sense that they were in trouble, but that fan base was also standing up for the first 2 periods of that game. They are. That's an incredible building. I mean, that is an incredible place.
Yeah, it is a good building. Although I do understand what the point that Mike's making. I mean, you wouldn't see that in a more traditional market. You would not see that. I mean, that's kind of a college football attitude as opposed to in hockey where 3-0, they weren't likely to come back, but you paid a lot of money for those tickets. You should stick it out at least to the last few minutes. But
I always think it's a little unfair, guys, to actually to based on like a scan of the audience from a camera, to tell what's going on.
Okay. Hey, Ak, all I know is it reminded me of the fact that when Kirk Gibson hit the home run in '88 against the Oakland A's, you could see the cars leaving Chavez Ravine and the lights of the cars as they stopped as the home run was going out the building.
Mike, you don't have to tell me. My dad left 8 minutes early to every game I ever went to as a kid, and I heard a lot of great comebacks on the Walt Whitman Bridge in Philadelphia. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
So we have the Western Conference Finals starting tonight, Colorado and Edmonton. I obviously am stunned that Edmonton got here, but they did, and I have to give them credit for that, begrudgingly. But now they come up against what arguably I think is, either the best or second best team in the league.
Yep.
And I mean, like you wrote today.
Yeah.
This is not simply McDavid versus McKinnon. This is something bigger. These are multi-dimensional teams. These are teams with a lot of weapons.
It really is. And the other thing that's really fascinating about this series, because we're talking about the other goaltending situation, with Vasilevsky and Shesterkin, is the goaltending situation in this series are two guys who've been around and are like, this is their moment. This is a big time for them. And Kemper. And when you look at their records against the other teams, I mean, year to year, whatever. But I was stunned to find that Mike Smith's 13-1-4 in his career against the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, against the Colorado Avalanche, sorry. And that Kemper's 10-2-3 against the Edmonton Oilers in his career. That's just like two goalies who've lost a total of 3 games in regulation against their opponents. That's, for what it's worth, that gives them a little bit of confidence, at least going into the game. I'm not saying it's going to change anything, but you're right. I mean, there's a lot of other stories here besides that, although I think the story to me is Makar versus McDavid. If I'm going to say one thing, I think that's the story. I think that's really, we want to see that. That's what I really want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the story is just the fact that McDavid and Draisaitl are here, and I mean, I think it's good. Those two have been part of the top 5 or 6 players in the league for a while, and they haven't had an extended run. And it turns out we were all wrong about their goaltending and whether their defense was going to be good enough. And I think they've proven. I mean, I think you just said it, Ek, there are 28 teams that aren't here, and their goaltending has been good enough. And both of these goalies, are pros. Neither one of them we're going to list among the elite goalies in the league, but they've gotten them here. They've gotten them the 8 wins they've needed to get there. So, it's going to be good. And it won't be just, the 2 guys. It'll be decided by, breaks and just like every other series, So.
I think one thing I want to mention, and then I'll let you guys talk, sorry, is the fact that I've been rough on Mike Smith too. Obviously, we all have. But the one thing you have to remember, when you look at his numbers, they're incredible right now for what he's done. And also, the fact is, he's just a different kind of goalie. Like, I think we're so used to one kind of goalie all the time. His style is so hard to wrap your hands around something.
Well, I mean, he's got that puck handling ability where he's almost like a third defenseman, and that blue line needs it. I mean, if I look at this series, Kev, and I see Makar, Taves, Josh Manson, Bowen Byram on one side, and on the other side, I think Evan Bouchard's a really good young blue liner. Darnell Nurse is not 100%, and then you got a flawed defensive guy in Tyson Berry, who's mostly a power play quarterback, and Duncan Keith. If Edmonton wants to get into a track meet, Colorado will oblige them because they've got the weapons to kick their butt. I
think Edmonton would hold their own in a track meet. Just because they've got Connor McDavid. Now, I don't think that's a wise decision for them because I think there's more weapons on the Colorado side. But, I think this will be like, and I'm going to sound cliched, but this will be like a fight, a heavyweight fight. It'll take the first couple of games, and then we'll see how they're going to play it. And, and there'll be coaches will try to figure out what's the best thing to do because, and it's also a cliche as well, but it's true. Like playoff series are completely different than, so you have to sort of see how, it's going to happen. But I think it's going to be fun just because of the talent level. And, I like the storylines, both teams. looking to prove something. Both Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid looking to take their game to the next level in terms of a level of accomplishment. And a lot of guys that people have been down on. Mike Smith. Has gotten beat up a little bit, even though, we've talked about this before. He played really, really well last season in the regular season. He just didn't get enough credit for that.
Yeah.
Kemper really, before he'd played for such a poor team, no one paid attention. They always said, well, he was a good goalie on a bad team. Well, now he's on a good team. So there's pressure on him. And, so it'll be interesting to see how he steps up. But I think we're beyond being able to say like, well, Colorado or Edmonton's goaltending is going to betray them. They're in the conference final. Like,
I don't think either goalie.
I'll still say.
I don't think either goalie is going to kill them. But honestly, I only picked Edmonton last round because I saw a flaw in Calgary. Edmonton's not going to be as fortunate. They're still a one-line team. They have some other guys. They have some good defensemen, but they are still basically a one-line team. And Colorado rolls 4, and that's a huge problem for Edmonton. That unless McDavid's playing 30 minutes a game, they're not going to be able to get past. I don't think
that's true. That's true, Russ. But Draisaitl's 17 points in 5 games the last series. It's okay if you're a one-line team. You're scoring 3+ points a game.
I get it.
But the problem is if they like they did against Calgary, and Calgary had no answer for it. If they load Kane, Draisaitl, and McDavid on one line, and Colorado can limit that line, they're done because they really don't. I mean, Zach Hyman, Nugent Hopkins both had good series, but they don't really have anything else besides Draisaitl and McDavid. They need those guys playing on separate lines to provide 2 lines worth of offense. And if they put them all together, I mean, sometimes it's impossible to stop.
Colorado's defense is way more mobile than Calgary's is.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right, but I wouldn't make that declarative statement.
No. I mean, I'm not saying go out and bet your house on Colorado.
Yeah.
But I will say this. This is a series, like X said, the matchup that intrigues him is Makar versus McDavid. My matchup is McDavid versus the Kadri line, because they will try to get Kadri with Nichushkin, and I think Rantanen is that second line against McDavid. And I know well from the history of Kadri playing against McDavid when Kadri was with Toronto, he got under his skin. He was an aggravating pain in the butt, and that Kadri does that very well. And
he did it against St. Louis, and he did it against St. Louis really well. And I agree that will be a factor. The other thing that people have to remember when they talk about Edmonton not being as talented or what have you, or not being as deep as Colorado, right now they are as confident as Colorado. They've won 2 playoff rounds, and confidence goes a long way in hockey. It really does. Confidence.
But they're both confident. I mean, you look at with Colorado is they've got spread out scoring. Edmonton doesn't.
Yeah, well, what is interesting is, and Mike circled around this a little bit, Colorado likes to spread its offense out. Rantanen doesn't play with McKinnon,
right.
And where the Oilers prefer to gang up. And, oftentimes here's a lot of discussion about that. But, they didn't break up Trache and Bossy, and that will, they didn't break up Curry and Gretzky to spread it out, even though they had other players, but
they did have a lot of other scorers on both those teams, though. Yeah.
They had scorers on those teams, but there was no doubt that they, that one line was dominant, and if you were going to shut that line down, but you couldn't shut it down. So I think that's what the Oilers are going to count on.
We have Anthony on the show, and Anthony, the one thing that I think is the one area again that I think Colorado has a distinct advantage is the fact you look at their third and fourth lines, and they've got veteran guys like Darren Helm and Cogliano, who they brought in at the deadline, and I think you look at like Ryan McLeod. I mean, I'm not I'm not crapping on Ryan McLeod, but I think the experience factor that Colorado has deep in their lineup is similar to the way the Colorado teams when they had Mike Keane, those guys on the third. That's an advantage in a playoff series.
I would agree. And I think their defense is also, at the deadline, obviously pick up with Manson, I think was huge for them, adding, stretching out their defensive core, which was already solid to begin with, but make it even further. Colorado had, they kind of, to me, have taken on sort of the Western Tampa, sort of mindset in this case, where they know it now. They're all in. They have chips to the table now, but still obviously some things left behind, just like Tampa is. But that's who Colorado really kind of reminds me of. They're like Tampa from a few years back, as they are now realizing, yes, we can win. Yes, we can go deep. Yes, we know we can do this. Especially when you go up against a team that's, I think, is St. Louis was, I thought, a very good opponent for them in the second round, in terms of going up against a team that had Stanley Cup, has championship level experience, and obviously different. Obviously not with them not having Pietrangelo anymore, but still, there's enough of those players that knew on that St. Louis lineup that knew how to win, and that's something that Colorado had to overcome, and were able to do so. So I just feel like when you get down to things here, Colorado, as Mike has alluded to, I think Colorado's depth in this circumstance is something that kind of trumps Edmonton in this series. As good a run as Edmonton has had, Eck, and I would agree with you. They've had it's been a wonderful run for them, and they also now have confidence as well that they can perform in the playoffs. I just feel like this is the one opponent where they're going to need to get up in this series quickly, or else I think Colorado, can take them probably. I don't want to say in short order, but I think they can. It'll probably be a 6-gamer.
Yeah, I mean, both these teams have the interesting thing, like Kevin, you said perfectly. I think that these goalies aren't going to lose the series necessarily for them at this point. You kind of realize that Kemper and Smith are going to be there, but they both also, one of them could actually win the series for them, which is interesting. And also, to me, at the end of the day, when you look at Colorado and you look at Edmonton, they both have this. Even though they're in the conference finals, they both still have this issue where they can't. McKinnon and McDavid haven't won a Stanley Cup. There's still this incredible amount of pressure on them, and if they fall behind, you're right, Anthony. I think Edmonton gets ahead early. Colorado could get nervous. They really could see Colorado get nervous because Colorado's still supposed to be here. They might have gotten past the second round, but that's not like the biggest accomplishment in the world for a team that, as you rightly said, is the best team in the West.
I mean, Colorado has been the favorite, the betting favorite, since July of last year.
Yeah,
I think there was a couple of weeks when they might have felt close to some other team, but for the most part, they've wire to wire, they've been the betting favorite.
Yeah, and the last couple of years, actually, it feels like the last couple of years they've been there too. So I don't know.
Just wanted to touch on a couple things. One, it was sort of hilarious to see the response from the Canadian media regarding the officiating in the gold medal game at the World Championships. I heard one comment that said it made the Blake Coleman decision, the goal decision on the Blake Coleman goal, look great in comparison. Now, Russ, I don't know. Did you see any of the World Championships?
I didn't watch a minute.
Yeah.
I watched some video to see some of the younger players. I didn't watch any of that game yet. It's on my DVR, but
this is a theme on our podcast for those who listen to All at the Post Radio, is how much they were listening to or paying attention to the to the World Championships, but
lack there. It's okay. The World Championships are normally not on my radar unless the U.S. is in there. The U.S. was in the Final Four, and apparently they lost like half their defense. And
they were playing with 4 defensemen at the end.
Yeah. So it's like,
I mean, each defenseman was playing 30 minutes a game. I mean, that's why they just had. But the amazing part about this World Championship, and it just shows you how far still Canada and the U.S. are. You look at their rosters, both the U.S. And Canada. And you're just thinking, oh man, that's the best you can do. Like they were kind of weak, and yet both of them got in the semifinals. Both played for a medal. Canada went all the way to the gold medal game. It's pretty impressive that they did all that. But we always have issues with officiating because international hockey is just not officiated the same as the NHL, and so it's always harder on the players to sort it out, and they're always shaking their heads over the calls. And But I usually like watching it, but I just didn't have the opportunity. I saw USA play 2 or 3 times, but that was really good.
Andrew's right, though. There was a picture of the Finnish prime minister with a glass of wine in her hand. That got a lot of play.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I did see the grades. That's the difference between European media coverage. The Czech Republic, in the Czech Republic, one of the newspapers did grades on all the individual players, and they really had unkind words for Vrana of the Czech Republic, because he had averaged a goal every other game for Detroit since he's got over there, and he only had 1 goal. He didn't do well in their grading system, and Hronek actually played pretty well over there, so he got a high grade. But in Europe, they're tough on their players.
Russ, in preparation for the upcoming draft combine, I hearkened back to 2016 when I was, following fervently the chatter regarding Austin Matthews and Patrick Laine, and everybody said Austin Matthews was the no doubt number 1 pick. And then, what a shock. The World Championships come around and Laine scores a ton of goals. Yeah. And then all of a sudden a couple of people come out and say Laine is the number 1 pick. The Leafs should take Laine. And there was never any doubt that the Leafs were going to take Austin Matthews. Not one doubt, not 1 minute. Well, you fast forward to 2022 and Shane Wright is the overwhelming selection, number 1 overall. And then Slavkovsky plays in the World Championships and now on a prominent prospect writers draft list. He's the leading candidate. I mean, I understand we're 5 weeks away from the draft and they have to write about something. But does anybody in their right mind think?
I just say, look at it this way, Mike. You and I went down the list. If you have a chance to get a franchise center, or you have a chance to get a big scoring winger, the big scoring winger is never going to bring you to the promised land like a franchise center can, if you hit on that. And so that's why you have to go with the franchise center.
Unless you're Alexander Ovechkin, that's a different story.
But I mean, how often?
This is true. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I checked the draft expert on that one, but but I agree with his assessment about a number 1 center versus a winger. It's not even close. I mean, what are we always talking about every trade deadline? Trying to get that center or trying to get the number 1 defenseman. Those are the 2 hardest commodities. And Slavkovsky. I mean, what intrigues people about him is he's played at against men in pressure situations and performed really, really well. Like in the Olympics, he had 7 goals, and in the World Championships, he looked like he belonged. So
I can tell you what a scout told me a while ago, Kev, which once in a while I do see in players. I don't think any of us have seen enough in Slavkovsky to know this, but a lot of times there are guys in the draft, what you see is that guy. Like that is what that player is. And they'll get much better. Sometimes that's good enough, but sometimes they don't have a high ceiling. And that's what you have to worry about a little bit with Slavkovsky, I think.
And I've heard scouts say that they don't even think Slavkovsky is the number 2, that it could be Logan Cooley.
I think it's Cooley just simply because, again, even if you're putting him on center or wing, the hands that he has, we don't see guys with hands like that you can get out of traffic that often, along with great skating. Like, that's a rare combination. Even Slavkovsky doesn't have that. He does have size going for him, and there's definitely a big size bias, again, in the league. There's no question about that.
On the coaching front, it seems that there's been sort of a chill when it comes to Barry Trotz. So he came out, I think, on Friday or Saturday and said he was in no rush to make a decision, which if there are teams out there, Kev, there are 4 or 5 teams that want Barry Trotz. They're going to basically be waiting until Barry Trotz makes a decision. So it's going to hold up the market.
It really will. But I think everybody's fine with that. Like, what's the big rush? The draft is not until the only people who seemed anxious about it are us. We're trying to, be involved.
Right about it.
Exactly. I'm not talking about the 4 of us, but the media in general. Where's the information? We want to know, like, what's your list, little by little, little things are leaking out. We have 3 or 4, names on each, team, but I don't think anyone's close to making a decision. It sure doesn't feel that way.
Well, I mean, just as an example, Trotz has spoken to Philly by phone, but hasn't been there to actually interview. So it's kind of like, is he even going to? Is he just kind of like, hey, Barry, how you feel? It's weird.
I've seen people, be alarmed by no personal interviews, but anybody that knows the real employment world now, that's really common. The days of bringing people in,
you want to show them around, you want to show them the practice rink, you want to.
But you don't, that doesn't. They don't do that much anymore. Yeah. So
I think now, Kevin, you'd probably have to be very close or almost certainty where you're just about ready to agree.
Right.
You got to be right on the cusp.
Right.
Yeah.
I can
that. But I do think Russ is right on. I think there are a handful of teams that are very interested in Trotz, and that is going to hold. And I'm amazed because he wants a lot of money based on reports. Apparently Winnipeg hasn't said no way. Even though
he is one of the richest guys out there.
So yeah,
there is that. I'm sure Torts was showing the dog parks in Philly. I'm sure that was an issue.
Jim Montgomery's name has popped up in reference.
Finally, how long is that going to take?
Yeah,
to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also with him in the midst of the playoff run with St. Louis, I can see why.
For sure.
Now he's going to be available in that regard. And again, his first year, I thought, Jim, did a good job with Dallas. Things happened. So I mean, this.
For sure. I mean, the other name to keep in the back of your mind, because he's going to get some, is Derek Lalonde. He's Tampa Bay's coach, and he definitely will get some attention. He's been there a while. He was a Steve Yzerman hire in Tampa. He's done a very good job, and people say that he's been a real important part of their success as the buffer, and that's always what the assistant coaches are, the buffer between the head coach Cooper and the players. So, I would expect he'll get some interviews as well.
He also had Mike Bellucci as well. I know that was another recent interview for Philadelphia as well. So.
Former Vancouver head coach Travis Green's name has popped up in reference to Dallas. So I know that they were interested in Trotz as well. So, it's sort of like a merry-go-round here. It's all of a sudden, Green goes from Vancouver maybe to Dallas, and
you have to have your second and your third lined up. That's why we're hearing these other names, because a lot of these teams want Trotz, but you got to have your second and third lined up.
Right.
The minute Trotz says what team he's going to, it starts getting really hot to get the other ones. Then it becomes a contest.
I always love too that there's always a name that nobody had thought of, and then suddenly he comes in there. I noticed, I believe it was Elliot Friedman, but correct me if I'm wrong. Mark Savard, who is at the Windsor Spitfires, who's done a real good job with the Dallas Stars top prospect. Apparently, Jim Nill is interested in him. Now, he doesn't have an NHL coaching background, but he was an NHL player.
Right.
Wyatt Johnson, was that the player that they drafted? So he was kind of come out of nowhere, and suddenly now everybody's talking about what a steal he was for the Stars, and apparently Savard has been given credit for his development. So.
And that might be Marty St. Louis worked for Montreal. Let's go with a former star player. Savard was a very good player for Boston, and I wouldn't doubt Elliot's connections because Mark Savard worked for Sportsnet for a few years. So I'm sure he's got some sort of insight into where, that possibility. And Elliot's got contacts all over the place. But a couple other things, Russ, there's a deadline for 29 prospects who were drafted in 2020. Their eligibility runs out on June the 1st. They either go back into the draft, and if they're not drafted, they become UFAs. I know you looked over the list and you said there were a couple. One was Philip Johansen, a former first-round pick of the Wild. I looked at his statistics. He's doing absolutely nothing.
No, that was a bad pick by Chuck Fletcher and company back in the day. he's not going to. Well, it's just it is
No,
what it is. Like
I know. I'm just
it was a bad pick. I don't think he's going to do much. I think Connor McLennan, he's got a day to sign with the Flyers. I think they'll sign him. He's a good one. And Utunen is a very good one. Utunen is not an offensive defenseman. He's like a 5'11", excellent puck-moving defenseman that can be a shutdown guy, which now we have to kind of look at the way the league is and say, you don't have to be a 6'3" defenseman to be a shutdown defenseman. You could be faster, have a great stick, and take good angles and get the puck and get you nowhere near the net that way.
Chemo Timonen? Basically Chemo Timonen?
Yeah. But you know what's funny? Like, how many Timonens are allowed to play in this league? Not too many.
Agreed.
Yeah. But basically, that's what he could be. And I think somebody should pick him up because I still think there's runway there for him. So those are the two that I like.
Kev, over the weekend, and I was on the media call, Jason Spezza announced his retirement. A long and storied career, 38 years old. He had almost 1,000 points. Only got to one Stanley Cup final with Ottawa in 2007. But I've never seen somebody like more well-respected throughout the league. I mean, he only played for 3 teams. It wasn't like he was like a Mike Sillinger and played for a dozen teams. But, I mean, the love that he got, I saw Mark Stone and Jamie Benn and Austin Matthews. I mean, a very well-respected player. Now he moves into the management role with the Leafs.
Yeah, an above-average player. He's kind of one of the we only celebrate the kind of superstars, and we sort of lose the guys who were really good players and really were helpful to their teams. And as you said, one of the good guys of the game, respected by the media, respected by his teammates. He was just a polite guy. Like he was, he never didn't seem to have any bad days, and always easy to talk to. Always had something interesting to say. Always looked beyond his own team. As a national writer, I loved talking to him because you could go to him, and if we were talking about rule changes or things that needed to be adjusted, he would always have an opinion on it. It was always reasonably well researched. He had thought about it a little bit. So I always appreciated him, and the game was better for having him in it.
Yeah, that was the first draft that I covered, and there was a fair amount of hype for Spezza, and he got close to living up to it. He did, and you could see it's funny. He would have made a really good Islander had they not traded that pick and everything else that made up that Yashin deal that turned out to be horrific for them. But
Chara and the number 2 overall pick,
and Bill McCall too was a pretty good player. Yeah. So, but Spezza lived up to it. But I'll tell you, I could really see the guy, like how he was as a guy, when they had the All-Star game in Ottawa. I was in that whatever team he was on, because every year now you forget which Legion it is. Is it an actual Eastern team? Is it something? But that locker room, he was in there. He was there with his kids. He was talking to other kids. He was just like, I watched him for like 5 minutes. I was interviewing some other players, wanted to get to talk to him, but he was just enjoying hanging out with these kids. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Jason Spezza is really kind of down to earth, got it together. And this year with the Leafs, like he actually gave the best exit interview that I heard of any of the Maple Leafs. Like he actually got it right. He knew they got very close to winning. It's not good enough. It's got to be worked on. And then, and Mike knew this. And then you kind of had a feeling that, he was talking about it almost like a coach, like looking at it like, yeah, but it's not going to be me because they're not going to want me. And, good for the Leafs to retain him because he is a smart hockey guy and you never know what he could do in the future.
Yeah. Anthony, he talked about it in his media availability. He was, very close to Dubas, very close to Keefe. They were honest with him and said, we respect you and everything, but in terms of your position, next year, maybe you play half the season, maybe you play 50 games. You're getting up there. They didn't say, I'm just saying that's probably the reality. They recognize he's 38 going on 39, and they've got young players that they want to get in on the 3rd and 4th line, but they respect him. And they, I think that the fact that they're bringing him into the organization, and I asked the question of Dubas, and he didn't say no, that his job is going to be using those connections throughout the league as basically the chief recruiter of the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's where it's going to go. He's going to be contacting players and say, hey, come to Toronto for the veteran minimum for a year.
I think it's that, and also the fact that, he, with recent experience as a player as well, he brings, I think, probably very keen insights. He's got a good grasp on, as Kevin stated, on issues throughout the league. And it's good to have that person, if you can't collect enough good people at the end of the day. And if you
right. And he played the Stanley Cup, so he knows what it's like to get there.
He's been deep. He's also can speak to the experience of being a high draft pick, especially when you take a look with potential younger players that the Leafs will have as well. Yeah. That his experience can help in that regard as he begins to build up. I have very little doubt that Jason Spezza has a very good chance. I don't know how far into the future to be a National Hockey League general manager.
Yes,
that's a great point, Anthony. Yeah. Great point.
And Dubas even said that he recognizes that there's no limits on Spezza. If he wants to be a GM someday or wants to be a coach or whatever, he could do it. One item, and then we'll end the show here from the rumor chart. I don't have the ability to bring it up on the screen, so I'll just read it off here. Ben Sherratt, who was traded from Montreal to Florida, retained 50% salary. We know the Panthers' salary situation going into this summer. It's not good, so they probably are not going to be able to bring him back. And Eck does not have Florida as one of the 5 options of the Ben Sherratt going back there. He has 25% for the Nashville Predators, 20% for Montreal, 20% for Detroit, 20% for the LA Kings, and 15% for the Edmonton Oilers. I'll just, it's a good list. I'll just shoot down one. I don't know if he's going, if Montreal in a rebuild is going to bring back a 32-year-old.
Gordon's not going to want a guy at his age.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they don't really have the money either to do that.
Right.
They're looking to dump salary, not add. So.
Right, exactly. They're trying to trade guys like Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher. So bringing back Ben Sherratt, unless you're going to sign him for 1 year and flip him at the deadline for assets, Anthony.
I would peg him as likely to return to the Montreal Canadiens as Claude Giroux is to the Philadelphia Flyers.
I agree.
Based on salary structures and everything else, and the fact that I think they're moving on in this circumstance. I would definitely peg that in that circcircumstance.
Now, do you think Sherratt's realistic for Detroit? Is that?
Well, it fits into what they're looking for. They really want to get a veteran defenseman, preferably one who is defensive minded, who can sort of stabilize that group. They've got Edvinson coming in next year. They've already got Moritz Seider, and they're not going to bring anyone in. They want everyone to understand that this is Seider's team, and there's for good reason. He is a dominant. Even as a rookie, he was a dominant performer. So he needs help, and so he fits that mold. So they would be. I'm not sure he would come to the Red Wings because they're not even close to being ready. But he certainly would be the kind of guy that Steve Yzerman would want on this team.
Did Nick Leddy burn his bridges there, or is he the type of defenseman that they?
No, not at all. But he didn't perform real well. He was much better in St. Louis. I think he was a little lost. Seider did all the things that he does. And he was pretty responsible defensively as well. Leddy did some good things, but what Leddy does, the Red Wings were unable to take advantage of. I think Leddy, there's a reasonable chance he can end up back on the island.
Okay. So. All right, guys, great show. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for the departed Jan Levine, the departed and on the road Eklund, Kevin Allen, Anthony Mangione, and Russ Cohen. I'm Michael Jello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just